What was forecasted to be an insane hurricane has even gotten crazier as Hurricane Milton continues to rapidly intensify in the Gulf of Mexico and is forecasted to become a Category 3 hurricane today and could become a Category 4 or even 5 hurricane tomorrow as it continues to move towards Florida. To put it in simplistic terms, this is going to be a monster of a hurricane. So let's jump into what it looks like right now on the infrared imagery. This is Hurricane Milton, which has become a lot more organized over the last 24 hours. It is very slowly moving to the east at about 7 miles per hour, but it will eventually pick up speed as it moves past the Yucatan Peninsula tomorrow. For the time being, it is still very far away from Florida. Again, we still have a couple of days until landfall, so last preparation should be being made right now. This is a closer view of Hurricane Milton, and again, notice an eye is actually starting to appear just a little bit there near the center. We are seeing a lot of convection wrapping around the eye, and we fully have an eye wall now, so this is expected to rapidly intensify through the day today. It will become a major hurricane later today and perhaps even a Category 4 hurricane around or just after sunset tonight. So this thing is really starting to ramp up. This hurricane is very rare. We've never had a major hurricane in recorded history start in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico and move into the state of Florida, especially in October. So this is a very rare situation that we're dealing with, and this is expected to be a major hurricane over the next 24 hours. And even upon landfall in Florida, it's expected to be a major hurricane. What makes this even more rare is that we've not had a major hurricane make landfall within about 40 or 50 miles of Tampa Bay within the last 100 years. So this is a very rare situation that we're dealing with, and many computer models right now have this making landfall somewhere between Cape Coral, Florida, and just to the north of Tampa near Spring Hill, Florida is the current range that the models have this making landfall in. Another rare part of this is the intensity that it could become over the next several days, and many computer models right now have this at a Category 3 or 4 intensity as we go into Tuesday. There is a chance that this could become a Category 5 hurricane just north of the Yucatan Peninsula. The National Hurricane Center has also mentioned that their forecast is still a little bit conservative, but they currently are forecasting maximum sustained winds at 145 miles per hour on Tuesday, which is about 10 to 15 miles per hour off from being a Category 5. The good news about this is that the hurricane will encounter wind shear as this gets closer to Florida, so we are expecting a weaker hurricane upon landfall, but weaker does not necessarily mean we are not going to see impacts, because we are still going to be talking about major impacts in Florida despite the weakening trend that is probably going to happen before landfall. And the wind field is also going to grow in size, meaning that a much larger chunk of Florida is going to be dealing with tropical storm force winds or greater. Now let's talk about the track and intensity in more detail, and I'm going to show you two different hurricane models. These are built specifically for hurricanes. They are usually very accurate and reliable. This is the HAFS-B model run. Notice as we go into Tuesday morning, just north of the Yucatan Peninsula, this becomes an intense Category 4 or even 5 hurricane, and it actually drops down to near 901 millibars of pressure. I'm not saying that this is going to be a historic hurricane, but pressure like this is very low, and it is not very common. This could potentially be the worst hurricane that we've seen all year when it comes to intensity in the Gulf of Mexico. But even if it doesn't do that, we are still talking about major impacts for Florida. And also I want to point out how small this hurricane is. 901 millibars on a tiny hurricane like this is not something that is really impossible. Helene was a much larger hurricane, but here's the interesting thing that happens. Look as we go into Wednesday as this approaches Florida. Look at all the green spread out. That is indicating a much larger and broader wind field. And this is also starting to weaken as it moves towards Florida as we go into Wednesday afternoon. 924 millibars of pressure. That is a notable drop. That's about 20 millibars compared to the day before, but it even weakens even more as it moves towards Florida, down to 950 millibars. This is still a major hurricane, by the way, so even if it weakens, it is still going to be a major hurricane and posing major storm surge impacts that'll be life-threatening, prolific rainfall, and hurricane force winds. But again, this wind field just grows in size, and that is where we're going to be seeing tropical storm force winds, and even the hurricane force wind field is going to be relatively large for a hurricane like this. But that vertical wind shear is really going to eat into this hurricane, which will help to weaken it near landfall, but it's not going to be enough really to basically hamper all of the impacts that we're going to see. As we go into landfall sometime Wednesday night, this will eventually make landfall. Where it makes landfall still remains uncertain, but it could make landfall anywhere from just north of Spring Hill, Florida, as far south as Cape Coral. I'm still leaning at a landfall somewhere north of Tampa Bay. currently, but again, it could still change, so make sure that you are staying very alert. And then as we go throughout the day, or really throughout the night, I should say, Wednesday night into Thursday morning, this continues to move across central Florida, and we are going to see on the backside of this hurricane, once it moves back into the Atlantic Ocean, a strong northerly wind that is going to bring storm surge into areas like the east coast of Florida, near Daytona Beach and Jacksonville. So the impacts are just going to continue, and we're going to talk much more in detail about the impacts out of this hurricane in just a moment, so stay tuned. I also want to mention that we are going to be live on this channel tonight, and we'll have another video update later today. So if you are new to the channel, subscribe down below and click the bell icon down below so you're notified with the latest updates on Hurricane Milton. Now, this is the other hurricane model. There are several, but this is the HMON model, and I want to point this out because it doesn't show it nearly as intense here in the southern Gulf of Mexico, but still has a Category 4 hurricane throughout the day, Tuesday into Wednesday morning. Peak intensity would be Wednesday morning just to the west of Florida. The good news about the peak intensity is that it is still going to be well offshore, so we're not really going to feel those impacts here in Florida. But unfortunately, even with this, it is going to bring a ton of historic storm surge between Tampa and Cape Coral. This particular model has it making landfall right in Tampa Bay as we go into Wednesday night at 963 millibars of pressure, which would again be a considerable drop over what it's going to be Wednesday morning. Nonetheless, this is still a major hurricane, or at least near it, so definitely something that we need to watch for in terms of the trends. But unfortunately, a lot of these models currently showing a landfall near or just north of Tampa, which would be worst case scenario. No matter how strong this storm is going to be, we are still going to be dealing with major impacts in Florida out of Hurricane Milton. Let's begin with the rain. So before landfall, we are actually going to be dealing with rain here in Florida. This is what we will call a rainmaker. There will be on and off showers and thunderstorms today and tomorrow, mostly in central and southern Florida, where those darker, greens and also yellows are indicated both for Monday and Tuesday. And then once we go into Wednesday, that's when the real deal happens. But before we even have landfall, we're actually going to have a few inches of rain, especially in southeast Florida. This is through Wednesday morning, so this is before landfall. Many areas will pick up anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of rain, including the Miami area. Now, what happens around and after landfall? Well, here's the thing. We are going to be dealing with, again, a hurricane making landfall Wednesday near somewhere around Tampa Bay is my assumption right now. This would be around 11 a.m., so again, this is still offshore, but eventually as we get closer to the afternoon hours, this hurricane is approaching landfall near Tampa Bay, which again would basically be worst case scenario at this point in terms of the landfall position, because all that storm surge is just going to go right up into Tampa Bay, and that is a catastrophic situation. So as we go into Wednesday afternoon and evening, this is making landfall near Tampa as a hurricane. Notice all that rain falling here across central Florida. That is going to dump across Florida, and we are going to be dealing with flooding as well on top of the rain that we're going to see over the next couple of days. The good news is that this thing is out of here by Thursday morning, but wind and storm surge will continue on the east coast of Florida throughout the day on Thursday. So the end is not really there yet, at least for Thursday. Now here's what we're looking at in terms of total rainfall accumulation, at least an estimate. Notice how many areas here up the I-4 corridor from Daytona Beach back through Tampa are anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of rainfall. That, in my opinion, is a pretty solid forecast in terms of what I would think would happen out of this, but we could even see some isolated spots near 20 inches of rainfall. So this is definitely something that you need to make sure you're keeping in mind, is that we could have some flooding. But again, if the eye for whatever reason goes further south or north, the rain will also shift in that direction. So this is not a locked in number for your location. Keep that in mind. This is an estimate, but if the eye goes further south or north, it's going to change. If it goes right into Tampa and right through I-4, this is a pretty realistic forecast. So again, things very easily could change between now and then. And then in terms of wind speeds and wind gusts, we are going to be talking about a large tropical storm force wind field for most of Florida Wednesday night. Hurricane force winds will go right into Tampa or Sarasota, depending again on where the eye goes. If it goes right into the Tampa Bay area, this is again a realistic forecast. Hurricane force winds will be happening there, and then by Thursday morning, the winds are going to pick up on the east coast of Florida, Port St. Lucie, Palm Bay, Daytona Beach, starting to get closer to hurricane force wind gusts because the low pressure center will move offshore. There's really a lot of friction there right along the surface, again in the Atlantic Ocean, so that is all going to penetrate wind along the east coast and as well as storm surge. And then as we go into Thursday morning and afternoon, this eventually starts to move offshore, but it is going to be a big deal probably all the way until lunchtime on Thursday. And one interesting note about the tornado potential out of Hurricane Milton is that the potential for tornadoes in most hurricanes is either to the east or northeast of a hurricane's eye. In this case, because it's moving more easterly in terms of landfall, we are actually expecting the greatest tornado threat to be to the east and southeast of where the eye is. So I would expect the greatest tornado threat being Wednesday from about I-4 near Orlando and Daytona Beach and Tampa back down to the south. That's where I think the greatest tornado threat will be out of Hurricane Milton. Storm surge is expected to be the worst and most life-threatening impact out of Hurricane Milton, but exactly where that storm surge happens still remains up in the air, at least around where the most significant storm surge will happen. This is the Coastal Emergency Risk Assessment page, and what this essentially shows you is where this worst storm surge would be with the center of the cone of uncertainty. And currently, if the eye made landfall, let's say in Sarasota, Florida on Wednesday, we would be dealing with the worst storm surge around and just south of Tampa Bay, all the way back through Cape Coral, where we could see historic storm surge, perhaps upwards of 15 to even in cases up near 20 feet of storm surge out of this hurricane. And we are expecting storm surge to be a possibility up and down the east or the west coast of Florida. And then as we go into Thursday, after the day of landfall, we will also see the potential for a few feet of storm surge from about Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, all the way back through Daytona Beach and maybe even down near Melbourne, Florida. So it's a large area. Again, we're going to continue to keep you posted with the latest. Again, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, like the video. We're going to have updates today. We're going to have another live stream tonight and then also another live stream at some point tomorrow.